This video is going to cover the basics of dynamic content blocks in ActiveDEMAND. Dynamic content blocks are a tool that is used for inline customization of content on your website. The thinking is that you have some specific context to a web session and you present the right data to help move the prospect along the buyer journey. Dynamic content blocks can be inserted into ActiveDEMAND landing pages, or if you have a WordPress site, you can use shortcodes to identify segments of your website that can be dynamically presented via ActiveDEMAND. So if you take a look at this web page, really you can't tell which pieces of this web page are actually being contextualized or personalized because it really, the whole idea is that it is inline content, and the content again is generated as a result of the past session data, etc. And the reality is on this landing page, the only dynamic content we have is actually this block here. And this block here, we can, in the sidebar, how we use it today is maybe we have a promotion for a specific webinar, or maybe it's the case that you've shown an interest in call tracking, so we're going to present a call tracking banner on all of our content. Or if it's a case that we know you came from a specific site, one of our referral sites or affiliates, maybe it's a case we want to present, sort of reinforce the story of where you came from. A good example of this exact thinking is on the landing pages, or I should say the specific package pages for ActiveDEMAND. So if you take a look at our small business marketer package, it's a case that, this big banner here is actually fully dynamic content. And the dynamic content changes based on, again, the context of the visit. We may present, again, a webinar or webcast on the main banner of our website. But this specific instance, we're looking at the session data. And if you came from, for example, Pipedrive site, ActiveDEMAND knows you came from Pipedrive because of referring URLs and the source medium of the link from the Pipedrive site. So ideally, what we want to be doing is presenting the user with more information about or supporting the argument that ActiveDEMAND, which it does, integrates nicely with Pipedrive. Or alternatively, if you came from, say, WordPress, and again, ActiveDEMAND has an outstanding WordPress plugin, which enables you to do this dynamic content, you might have found the plugin on the WordPress plugin library, click the link from the plugin to get you back to the website, then again, now the banner should be talking about how nicely ActiveDEMAND integrates with WordPress. So really, the concept is simple, that this is actually a short code in our WordPress site, and the short code requested by the client, the server talks back to ActiveDEMAND servers, says what content is relevant for this specific visit. ActiveDEMAND does the parsing of the session and then hands back a segment of HTML code that when the page is rendered, of course, it is the contextual content. In ActiveDEMAND, how we're doing it is if you go to Assets, Dynamic Content Blocks, you can create a dynamic content block. And basically, the dynamic content block is pretty much the same as a landing page in ActiveDEMAND from a creation standpoint. Really, you have your content blocks that content templates that you drag and drop onto your dynamic block. You can use rows, columns. It is a fully responsive block of code. And as you see here, I'm showing you the WordPress version of the content block that's being rendered. And literally, it was designed in ActiveDEMAND by just dragging and dropping the content from the content library or the rows, columns, etc., and building this sort of mini landing page. And again, it is sort of like a mini landing page. And then again, the short code is referenced on the WordPress site, and then this content is rendered based on logic. And I'll show you that in just a second. So basically, if I created this content block, I'd start off with there has to be a default block. Because with dynamic content, we're assuming that if the queries all fail, then there has to be some content that's actually displayed to the user. And then the different versions of the content block are stacked and then popped off the stack based on what is the query of the session. So as you see here, there are several different versions that are stacked on top of each other with the default being here. And as you see, the default version doesn't really have much going. It's just basically talking about, in this case, what our small business marketing package is about. And the different versions are, again, stacked in a set of queries. So you have the default version, which will always render if all of the queries fail. And the queries go in order. So it's a case that before the page renders, it'll check the query for this version. If this one fails, it'll go to this version. And if it fails, it goes to this one. And finally, it will use the default if all of the queries fail. So if I go back to the WordPress version here, and I'll show you the query. As you see here, the query is quite simple. It's just looking at the UTM source contains WordPress. Again, all of the links in our plugin are coded, so it's a case that we have UTM source and UTM medium, and we look at the current session, and if the current session has UTM source of WordPress, this version will be displayed. All of these versions will have their own query, and again, if all the queries fail, it goes down to the default. So really, it's about building the default version first, clicking the Create Alternate Version, which will create your alternate version of the content block, and it will show up in this stack. And then again, you use your advanced targeting to ensure that you get the right content block displaying for the right person. And then you can as well order these different content blocks here to again give precedence to specific queries. Now, something else that you can do is actually override or insert a version of the content block from within a campaign. If I wanted to override this content block on this page for example, promoting a specific webinar or specific event, then what I would want to do is inside my campaign, I'll show you a campaign here, I would browse to my Assets tab, down to Dynamic Content Blocks, and create a new content block. And I would insert it into the group of content blocks that are currently being represented on the landing page. And if you notice here on our campaigns, we have a promotion duration. We can create a start date and an end date for a specific promotion, link our dynamic content to the promotion duration, and when the duration's done, the content will disappear or become inactive rather, and the default content or the default logic for the specific content block stack will be accessed. So if I browsed over to, again, the assets here, I want to create a dynamic content block that inserts into our web page, I'd click here and go new. And again, I can check this saying this content is going to be only active during the promotion duration. I would name my content block. And I can create one from scratch, or I can just add it to an existing content block group. And as well, I can either use a template or the specific content block I've selected in the list. And it will bring me to the content block editor, and once the content block is created, again, it would just be active during the promotion duration. Now, I've shown you how to build content blocks, and really to build content blocks, you browse over to the Assets, Dynamic Content Blocks, click New, or I can go into one of these stacks, edit the specific version, and create the alternate version like I described before. As well, you can clone entire groups. So maybe it's a case that you want to start from a set that you have on one of your pages. You can clone the entire group here. Or again, you can go in and edit one of these and create an alternate version is the idea. Something else to notice is that you can actually use dynamic fields in the content block. As the content block is fully rendered before it's sent to either WordPress or your landing page, of course, ActiveDEMAND has the session. It knows who's looking at the specific asset. Hence, you can use dynamic variables inside the dynamic content block, like we're doing here. This allows you to personalize the content on the website. Getting dynamic content blocks onto a landing page is very simple. In ActiveDEMAND, in a landing page builder, basically all of your dynamic content blocks will show up in your dynamic content slider. You drag and drop the dynamic content block onto your landing page. And once it's on the landing page, it will show up like a regular content block. And to edit the dynamic content block, again, you click the advanced edit, which is this pencil, which will bring you back to the dynamic content block editor. This concludes the dynamic content block video. Dynamic content blocks are very powerful and allow you to, again, contextualize and personalize the web sessions for your visitors.